All right. Greetings from the Dark Continent. Conscious Caracal here, or Adams van Sail. And tonight we're talking about something again that's very pressing. Last week I had Herman Roos on to talk about specifically the tobacco industry. And tonight I'm talking to Francois Rossouw, the CEO of the Southern Africa Agricultural Initiative, about their cases to save the wine, hunting, and tobacco industries. They're going on a three-pronged approach. So we're going to get into that. If you have any questions for Francois, please ask in the live chat, and we'll get right into that. So welcome on the show, Francois.
Thanks, Ernst, and good evening to all your listeners and viewers.
All right. So firstly, maybe to get this out of the way, what exactly is Saai? I mean, you are definitely new on the block. It's not an old traditional name in the South African agricultural sphere. What's your modus operandi and your mission?
So Saai, otherwise known as the Southern Africa Agricultural Initiative, is an organization that protects the rights and interests of family farmers. Now, a family farmer is any person who owns or manages a piece of land, who makes a living with his fingers in the ground. And it was important for us, especially in the context of the Decade for Family Farming that was launched last year by the United Nations, that we set up the structure in South Africa for an organization that solely looks at the rights of family farmers.
All right. And now in 2020, it seems like your hands are full. You're really taking the bull by the horns. Even though you're still a young organization, you're not wasting time to get involved. And I mean, the lockdown regulations that are impacting the agricultural industry so heavily has given you a golden opportunity to really leave your footprint and to leave a mark. So can you tell us a bit more about, I mean, this is the title of this interview, is how you're going, the fight for the wine, tobacco and hunting industry. How are you going about doing your part in helping these farmers?
Now, look, when we say we are an organization that protects the rights of family farmers, it's important for us to keep family farmers on their farms. And when COVID struck initially in level 5, most farmers were able to move around, but it was a really tedious process. So we started at that time issuing these digital travel permits for family farmers. And then there were certain industries that could not function quite correctly. And one of them was the tobacco industry, and then also the wine industry and the hunting industry. And when farmers from these sectors approached us, we decided to get involved. The first one was the tobacco case, and we approached BATSA and had a good discussion with them, and they recently represented 9 applicants, or we were 10 in total, from across the value chain to see whether we can overturn Regulation 45 of the regulations, the sale and transport of tobacco products. Now, that case came to an end last week, Thursday, where we had 2 days in the Western Cape High Court on a full bench. And then later, or while we were still doing that, we were also approached by the wine farmers in the Western Cape. And we to try and overturn, Regulation 44, which is the sale and transportation of alcohol. And although these products can be exported, most family farmers are reliant on the local market. And then tomorrow morning, we will also be issuing an application on behalf of game farmers to allow for inter-provincial hunting, because we've got a lot of game farmers who just came out of a drought. They've got bills to pay. They did not receive any international hunters this year. So I think it is critically important that we get their market open, because they don't have a long time, much time left for hunters to visit them.
So maybe for our international viewers and maybe even South African viewers that are unaware, can you just maybe briefly say what is happening that is really that are obstacles for these 3 industries? We can start with the tobacco industry. What type of regulations are you fighting with each of these 3? Let's start with the tobacco one.
Yeah, so with regards to the tobacco case, there was Regulation 44, which prohibited the sale and transport of tobacco products initially in its entirety. So even if a farmer had tobacco leaves on his farm, he was not allowed to transport it to a processor. Now, that is allowed, but it still doesn't mean anything for these farmers, because they still have this product under lock and key, and no one wants to buy it anymore because there's already a glut in the market. And it was important for BATSA to represent all of the, not just farmers, but processors and sellers, etc., to try and overturn this ban. I mean, there's more than 300,000 people that is affected in this industry, and it delivers billions of rands. I mean, I think they lost about 4.5 billion rand in duty taxes. So there was the main argument was based on two legs. We first had the constitutional argument, where we said, listen, that you are impeding with regards to family farmers on Section 22 of the Constitution, your right to choose your trade and to practice that, and also your right not to be deprived of your property. And then on the other side, there was an administrative argument to say, listen, there's procedural and decisional irrationality issues here that we just can't get past. There is no link. And it is important to remember this throughout all three topics, because it all relates to farmers in the same way, is that the Disaster Management Act was put in place to curb the spread of COVID and to alleviate the effects thereof. This is no time to drive an anti-alcohol, anti-tobacco agenda. That is not what these regulations are for. And so this was to show that there was no data provided to the minister, or the data that she had was not sufficient to show that depriving citizens of tobacco products would alleviate the spread of COVID. And the minister's main argument there was that there would be more ICU beds available. Now, she made this sum on, there's 8 million smokers in South Africa. She said that by banning cigarette sales and smoking, about 1 million of them would stop smoking. So if we take 1 million and we say, okay, and she by her own account said that 1% of that 1 million will contract the disease, and of that 1%, 5% would need ICU beds. Now, spread over a period of time, the minister then would free up 16 ICU beds, where South Africa has 3,300. Now, is that in any way proportional? And that is the test when you're talking about infringing on people's constitutional rights, Section 36(1). You have to see, is it proportional, the action that you are implementing, to alleviating the effects thereof? And we don't think so. Not if you see the amount of money that is lost, not if you see the amount of jobs that are lost. So that in a nutshell is about what the arguments were in the tobacco case. When we came to alcohol, we represent the interest of family wine farmers. So our main argument here was that a wine farmer is not an alcohol producer. Wine is an agricultural product with some that contains alcohol, not an alcohol product that contains some agriculture. And the way it's produced is much different. A wine farmer is not someone that is looking for profit like a company does. He's got a name to uphold. He's got a tourism destination. He's got a family legacy. And that is why we said it is different. Now, we also have the constitutional aspect, which says, they are also farmers and they have the right to sell their agricultural product, and there's huge damages to the economy. And the minister just told us in her opposing papers that no, wine cannot be differentiated from other alcohol products, and that's just not true. We had these regulations made quite a while ago, and legislation that was enacted that said you can sell only wine in supermarkets, and that was an act, and that was passed. And there were three reasons for this. The reasons that was provided to enact this legislation was that said that it is important to pair wine with food, and it is an agricultural product, therefore it has to be sold in a supermarket. And then the other thing interesting was that 80% of decisions made in a supermarket are made by wives, by moms, and it's a much more conservative, much more reliable decision, and it's not reckless. So that is why they allowed it in grocery or stores or in supermarkets. And then the other thing that we said was, and the minister and the advisors told her, no, you cannot regulate wine or alcohol sales on a provincial level. It would be a logistical nightmare. The fact is, Schedule 5 of the Constitution already allows for this. Schedule 5 says that all alcohol products should be regulated at a provincial level. So we've already got this infrastructure. She just needs to make use of it. I think then the other thing as well is that table wine, is wine that contains alcohol with a level of less than 14%. Has a totally different approach when you look at legislation. It's already made provision for in all provincial legislation. So the minister's arguments just do not hold water when it comes there. And then the other thing, again, the data does not support vermins, freeing up space. And she says, no, that in the beginning of lockdown, there were a dramatic decrease in trauma cases. In the beginning of lockdown, we all still had booze in our houses. The fact is we just couldn't drive around. And trauma cases, alcohol-related trauma cases, that would be a data set. You can't just say trauma cases. Trauma can be a lot of things. So we've got all these other things when we talk about alcohol and wine consumption. How is it rational that a taxi can be loaded to 100% capacity and drive around, but you can't serve a glass of wine to a diner in a highly hygienic, socially distanced restaurant where the shop has to close at 9 o'clock because at 10 o'clock you have to be back in your home? So it just doesn't make sense. That part of the rationality thereof just doesn't make sense.
And
okay, and then
before we move on, then just the hunting industry as well. What regulations are you fighting there?
Okay, so with the hunting regulations, there's section 2, 3A and 3B of the biodiversity sector regulations. Now, this is a real mess. I can't tell you, on the 5th of June 2020, hunting was allowed. And when I use the term hunting, that is actually where our main argument is here. There is a huge issue with how it's defined in the regulations, and before it was allowed, it was already not clear what is meant by this, because at one stage it was said that hunting is allowed except for sporting and recreational purposes, and then when hunting was allowed, it was said that subsistence hunting was allowed, and then that other term just fell away, and then on the 28th of July, when Minister Barbara Creecy again issued regulation that closed it, she did so without any consent. And that is something that throughout all three of these industries happened, the past ban. No, there was no consultation with any industry bodies or with organizations that made the effort to deliver commentary, to get expert advice. And during each level, we sent in this commentary to the ministers and told them, listen, this is what our experts say. This would be the best for the industry. Let's please try and use something that is less aggressive, something that can save farmers. But that just did not happen. And again, with the argument, how can you tell 2 or 3 hunters, because you're only allowed to be 3 people in a 4-seater vehicle or a 5-seater vehicle to travel? How can you tell those people that you are not allowed to travel across provincial borders to go and hunt on an open farm when you can let most taxis fill up and drive across borders? Again, we've got this rationality argument that's just not making sense. But our whole hunting argument is also we've got a constitutional infringement argument in there, also based on Section 22. But then we've got a huge aspect that just focuses on the vagueness, and it's something that will make your head turn, because to have hunting, subsistence hunting that is not recreation or sport, and then we've got culling. There's no definitions for each of them in the regulations. And then today the minister told us, she sent us a letter and she said, yes, we know that for a month and maybe almost 2 months hunting was allowed, but that was not our intention. You interpreted it wrong. You know how many hunting travel permits we issued? Approximately 19,000 of them. And so the police also made an interpretive mistake for 2 months to let hunters across provincial borders. And you see the other argument here, because now intra-provincial hunting is allowed. So you are allowed to hunt within your province, but you are allowed to stay over in your province, but you're not allowed to travel over provincial borders. And now the issue with this is, and our data shows it, on that 19,000 hunting permits, we did some data analytics, and 88% of hunters travel inter-provincially to hunt. So if you ask a farmer in Limpopo, which is one of our deponents, who's also said, listen, I have absolutely no hunters that come from Limpopo to hunt on my farm in Limpopo. Most of them come from Gauteng, and our data also show that. Our data shows that 90% of people go from Gauteng to hunt in other provinces. Now, how are you going to tell let's just use our data set for 19,000 guys from Gauteng? No, go hunt in Gauteng. It would just not be possible. So, yeah, it's quite tough.
Right. So maybe even for a bit more clarity in terms of Saai's role, what is Saai specifically doing in these cases and to assist these? What is Saai's defining role in these court cases? And are you getting any assistance from other organizations that are helping you?
Look, with the British American tobacco case, we had Patsa that led the charge, and we approached them, and we had a good discussion with them. And I think it's much better to work together in cases like these, and it makes the arguments much stronger. So when we go in and we tell the other applicants or people that we work with that we come solely with a goal of protecting the rights of family farmers. So we do not represent banks, cooperatives, or agricultural unions. We represent individual family farmers that are trying to make a living. So that was with the tobacco, the same with alcohol. You see, it was actually funny that the best wedge we had of overturning the alcohol ban was using the argument from a family wine farmer's perspective. Because if there are less stringent ways to curb the sale of alcohol. I mean, wine is is a product that is maybe one of the most traceable products in South Africa. You can trace it right back to a certain vineyard. And I mean, if you can prohibit the sale of a nail in a shop, or at a supermarket, but you cannot sell, or you can prohibit the sale of a nail, but you can sell a hammer. Then why can't you say, no, you can just have 2 bottles of wine, or you can just sell wine and not something else? I mean, it's there. So and then from a hunting perspective as well, we represent game farmers and not hunters. But it's important to let hunters onto the farm, otherwise game farmers won't be able to get an income.
All right, and so you just mentioned a past case. Can you maybe explain what cases have you had now already, and which ones are coming up?
Yeah, there's I'm going to start from during lockdown, because there was a bunch of interesting cases that happened. Yeah.
Let's focus on the lockdown cases that you've done.
Yeah, we initially had a lot of issues with the travel permits. So we issued legal advice. We had a 24-hour standby cell phone and someone to man it, to ensure that people get through roadblocks. Because, as unsure as you think we are, I can assure you the police were more unsure. And if you guided them through the regulations and you interpreted with them, farmers were allowed to go through. But the first case that we actually had was the parrot farmers, the African grey farmers. And there's a lot more than you think, but their export market was closed. And when we helped them to open that market, then a lot of other industries came to us. If I think about the guys who farm with pigeons, and the guys who farm with cheetahs, and then there were the horse owners. There's 45,000 horse owners in South Africa, and they were unsure whether they could exercise their horses during lockdown, because the regulation said animal care is permitted. Now, what does animal care mean? And for anybody that doesn't do a deep dive into the regulations and interpretation thereof, you're not sure and you're afraid. So we assisted them in interpreting that, and actually there were a few horses that died as a result of the fact that they were not able to be exercised, but we got that also squared away. So with regards to the 3 matters we have in front of us, the tobacco case was last week and it finished up, so we are waiting for a judgment. in that
Before
matter.
you move on, for people that are unaware, I talked to Herman Roos last week on the show about this specific tobacco case. So if you are interested in another in-depth discussion on that matter, you can go check out that episode. It's the previous one on the channel. But yeah, please continue, Francois.
Okay, so the tobacco case that finished up last week Thursday, and it was heard by a full bench in the Western Cape High Court. We are expecting judgment either, I won't say this week, probably next week or the week after. Now, this is very important because the precedent or the judgment handed down will have a huge effect on the wine matter that is heard on the 18th of August. And then also on the hunting matter that we are looking to set down for the 25th of August. So with regards to the wine matter, we have until Thursday at 12 o'clock to file our replying papers. And I think we will get it done in that time frame. And then for hunting, we will file the initial application tomorrow morning. And we hope to set it down by the 25th at the latest.
I see here's a comment for you, Francois. A sideliner opinion says game farmers play a huge role in nature conservation. Bankrupting them will be an ecological disaster. Do you agree? And what are your thoughts on this?
Yes, our involvement with game farms go much deeper than this. So there's also a big push, and you would remember when COVID started, they said that we must stop eating game meat because that is where COVID came from. And this was actually just a push from the anti-red meat lobby to say that we in Africa should stop game farming and hunting, and especially trophy hunting. And this same issue was brought up at the EU General Assembly, and it was shot down unanimously because they saw it for what it was. It was propaganda. So it's important for us to look at this, especially from a conservation perspective. You know, South Africa is one of 3 countries in the world that farms with game, and that you can have ownership over game. And we've multiplied our numbers of game hugely. When Kenya decided to stop hunting in 1977, their game population fell by almost 70 to 80%. Most types of game like the rowan, etc., were saved from extinction because we put a price tag on it. If it pays, it stays. That is the slogan when it comes to hunting. If we do not have, if you do not provide an incentive for a community to protect that animal, because it is more worth for a hunter to come in and shoot it than to just get rid of it yourself. I think of the case where it was with elephants who destroyed towns or animals or crocodiles or whatever. Then that actually provides an incentive for somebody to put up a fence, to put up infrastructure, to employ some of the local people to work there. And laborers that work on game farms receive much more, a higher income than those from agricultural farms. And South Africa doesn't have a lot of space for agriculture. But that space that we cannot use for agriculture, and game farmers have done this quite successfully. They have turned over into successful game farms. So I totally agree with that. It's for us, it's a major conservation issue, and we're a glaring example. But if you try to tell this to someone in Europe or America, they do not understand that because they don't have that there. And it's important for us to show them that data and to show them the flourishing wildlife that we do have here.
So wait, just repeat that one fact. It actually blew my mind a little bit. South Africa, only one of 3 countries that has a mass game farm industry.
Yes, it's Namibia and I think Zimbabwe that are also allowed to where you can farm with game.
Yeah, that's very interesting. But on that topic, something maybe I'd just like some further thoughts on from you is this whole argument for preservation and hunting and its role in it. Because that's actually an argument you see very often from the anti-hunting lobby, is that it's just, I've seen the most ridiculous arguments from people saying that that elephants are being hunted to extinction in South Africa to whatever.
Yeah.
Can you maybe just give your final thoughts on that idea, the role that nature preservation and hunting, how that relationship functions. Maybe specifically for the people in the audience that have encountered these types of arguments against hunting and don't know exactly how to, in simple terms, give a good answer to these types of challenges or arguments.
Look, first of all, go look at the numbers. I mean, South Africa makes about 12 billion rand a year from the game industry. And we do not do that because we shoot out our best animals or we destroy populations. We make that amount of money every year because we protect those species. We go to great lengths to put up high fences, to have a great infrastructure for these animals. Farmers feed them additionally to ensure that there is more of them. Because if there was not a hunter who was willing to hunt it, that farmer would have no incentive to have that animal on his private game farm. And you see, otherwise he would have just taken out, he would have planted maize because that would have been more lucrative for him. So we have to look at that. And also, if we look at the numbers, also the amount of species that we have, where else can you have a bunch of private game farms who have more animals than the Kruger National Park? Or we have more privately owned animals. I think we've got about 20 million head of game in South Africa. And that is more than that's what's in the wild. So I think those figures speak for themselves. And but we need to get that message across as well.
So there you go. I think the bottom line is there's definitely a risk here for conservation as well, in terms of the damage that these lockdown regulations are doing to the hunting industry. I actually think that's a very interesting angle that a lot of people can take if they find themselves in a debate regarding these types of regulations. So maybe to get back to more your cases and the industries that you're trying to save, can you get into more detail on a case-to-case basis on these three industries, how they've been impacted? What can you tell us about the impact of these lockdown regulations on each? We can start with the tobacco industry, because I think that's the one that's very interesting.
Yeah, I think Herman would have told you as well that he sits with a lot of stock now that is behind closed doors, and he's not able to sell it to the producers, because they've already got some of the previous stock that were left, and they have already cut his production quotas for next year. So the damage is going to spill over to next year as well. And he will have to look for alternatives. I know he has alternate crops, but you see, the one thing, and it applies to all these industries, it's one thing to announce a lockdown. But for anyone to plan for their future, you need to give them a timeline. You need to give them an indication of when it's opening up again. And that is something that Herman and all the other farmers do not have at the moment. They cannot plan for their future because the minister says it will open up once the numbers die down. Or argument in one of the cases was it's not forever. It's not forever is not a measurable metric. We cannot plan a business according to it. And then with regards to the wines, I have been in the Cape in the Western Cape 3 times in the past month. I can tell you it's a ghost town down there. Some of the biggest wine farms that I know down there, some of them employ about 500 people. Most of them were let go. And it's a problem because we're not just talking about the sale of wine. We are talking about accommodation for tourists. We are talking about a flourishing tourism industry. We are talking about restaurants. So if you look at it, at the impact of that, I think it's about 350,000 people that are impacted with a ban on the sale of wine. So and there are no tourists coming in as well. And the Western Cape is heavily reliant on tourists. Now the minister said no, but luckily wine farmers can export their wine. That's just not the case. It's not enough, because we were closed for about 4 or 5 weeks in the beginning of lockdown, and a bunch of farmers lost a lot of market space, because as wine farmers we compete with the best other wine farmers in the world, and we do so without any government assistance like drought relief or COVID relief in this matter, and we have to fend for ourselves. But we can't do this if our markets are closed both nationally and internationally. And as we recently saw in an article published today, that the EU just can't trust our trading patterns. And how can they allow us to send products to them, but they can't send products to us because we cannot sell alcohol? And this creates a total distrust between markets. And then for the hunting as well, I think this is one of the worst for me, because we've got about 10,000 game farmers that employ a lot of people, and they only have from, let's say, May to maybe September, October, to allow for hunters on their farms. Now, we already lost 2 billion rand in income from international hunters. We've got about another 11 billion rand available from local hunters, and they are willing to do so. We saw the amount of hunters that are willing to go to a game farm to shoot something and to stay overnight. But time is just not on our side at the moment, especially for these farmers. So we've got to ask ourselves, what is the agenda? Why are we closing down tobacco farms? Why are we closing down game farms? Or why do we want to see the wine industry crumble to its knees? Because to me, this looks a lot like economic expropriation. We will see a lot more banks taking farms than any expropriation program will in the future.
That's actually a very interesting angle. So, I mean, this is one of the things that I wanted to ask you is, what do you think are the motives behind it, these absolutely absurd regulations? What patterns are you seeing? And we can only speculate, but what do you reckon your educated guess would be? What's going on here?
Yeah, with regards to tobacco, I received a clear answer from Japo last week. We were in Skalkberger Senior's cellar, and we were talking about the tobacco ban, and he's actually busy writing a new book. And I will leave it to his article that he said out of his national duty, he will publish it maybe this week or next week. But there's an answer there, and I can tell you there is political interference there. And I believe that as well, because there's no other reason for this. How can you, as the Minister of Kokta, or how can Minister Dlamini Zuma say, no, people will stop smoking because the price of illegal cigarettes are so high they won't be able to afford it? That is preposterous. How can a member of parliament...
A recent study from, I think, UCT just recently found that only 1 in 10 smokers quit so far.
Exactly. 93% of smokers still smoke. So if that is your formula for people to stop smoking, that yes, there will be an underground illicit trade market, but don't worry, most of the people won't be able to afford it, or in this case, 7% of the people. So and you're relying on criminal activity. That is your big plan. That is preposterous. So yeah, that is with regards to tobacco. With regards to wine, I can't really tell you, and I won't speculate any further. But I see the whole alcohol industry is taking a knock, and you have to ask yourselves, how did the taxi industry get it right to load up at 100% capacity? And so yeah, it's mind-numbing.
I think we're definitely going to see a lot more disturbing regulations in the future as these regulations take their toll. But luckily, there are people like you that are fighting the good fight. But I see here, talking about people fighting the good fight, Herman Roos is also in the chat. He's listening right now. He says, "Dankie, Francois, and in Saai, you, Theo, and the team have truly stood up for us. Your action is why we keep on farming." So yeah, you seem to have a very strong ally there, Francois.
Yeah, you see, we are heavily reliant on farmers on the ground because we have a different approach. If there's a problem, and we have a direct channel to the farmers themselves, especially with our members. If there's an issue, they usually contact us and they say, listen, I've got an issue with expropriation, or with whatever the case may be, with water, with electricity. And then we ask them, what is the best solution? So we consult with the farmers. And Herman was the first guy to say, listen, guys, we've got a problem. Can you do something? And we asked him, who are the role players? Who should we talk to first? And then we gather a legal team, and we build a strategy around that. But it's important to consult with the guy on the ground first.
I see here as a comment, Francois, that actually sums up very, very perfectly what you've already said. It says, you can't lock down a tobacco plant, a grapevine, or a kudu. They grow, carry fruit, and calf irrespective of regulations. I mean, that's the truth. That's the hard reality. That a lot of people that are not farmers don't understand. They think you can just pause your plants and your animals. You can pick up where you left off when the regulations are done.
Yeah, you see another thing that happened here, and it's for most of these farmers. Look, last year they made loans. They had to get production loans for this year. So they borrowed a lot of money and they planted, or they spent a lot of money on input costs. And then COVID came and everything came to a stop. The bank didn't tell them, no, you can stop your payments now or your loan just ceases. They still have to carry those costs. And farmers didn't call COVID. It's not their fault. And like I said earlier, we are one of the only countries in the world that don't support our farmers. France has just made a huge aid package available to their wine farmers because it's an industry that is important to it. It's something that is synonymous with their country. I mean, if you think about the Western Cape, that is synonymous with wine. And they've made something spectacular of it.
Just as the northern provinces, you could say, are synonymous with hunting.
Yes, that's how I see Limpopo as well, and the Northern Cape.
And now that you mentioned that France policy, you've probably been doing your research in terms of what other countries are doing in regards to their agricultural industries during this time. Can you give us some insights there in terms of what are you seeing across the ocean and across the borders? Probably not something mirroring us.
No, not at all. Look, it was one of the main arguments in our tobacco case to say that we are the only country in the world that have banned the sale of tobacco products. And then we have the minister quoting the WHO in her papers, but that's not something that they recommend. So she picks and chooses what fits her agenda, especially with tobacco. Then with regards to alcohol, countries like Sri Lanka and India and one state in Greenland tried to ban the sale of alcohol, but the illicit trade just picks up. And they especially said Lesotho and Eswatini was also one of them that banned the sale of alcohol. But they said that the illicit trade in alcohol then goes through the roof, and then it's a mess to put that industry back together once it is legitimized again, because now these roots have already formed, and it takes quite a while to get the industry then back on their feet.
Yeah, because now you've created an industry with ridiculously low prices in the black market, but not really the same regulations and quality. So you're getting a very inferior quality products, but the people are just seeing the prices. And I mean, that's going to do a lot of harm to these industries. But talking about that harm, I mean, there's definitely a ripple effect as well. I mean, people are just focusing on the industries affected. But I mean, if you look, you already touched on it when you talked about, for example, the tourism industry in the Western Cape being affected by the alcohol ban. I mean, cigarettes speak for themselves with the tobacco ban. And with hunting, I mean, it's also obvious. But are there any other further insights you can give us in terms of this ripple effect, that it's not just the farmers? People should not have the misconception that it's just the farmers that are suffering in their industries, that it's actually having a much larger effect just outside of sight. People aren't really seeing.
Yeah, look, I think the biggest one are the workers themselves. Because there's no money to pay these workers or their families. I mean, for each person that is employed by the industry, you can say 3 to 5 people are affected by it, because that is someone who supports their family. And to have that income lost, what will be the next avenue then? For how long do we have where people will just sit by and watch our government destroy the economy and people go hungry? That is how revolts start. So I think that is important as well. But then also just opening any value chain on a whim, it just doesn't start immediately. It takes 2 or 3 weeks just to mobilize certain parts of the value chain. I mean, with the fact of wine, when wine export started, farmers weren't just able to pack up their wine and send it off. There were a lot of travel restrictions, a lot of moving parts in the value chain had to start up again. Most people couldn't get to their offices, couldn't find labels, couldn't find corks. So it has a huge knock-on effect, and we will see this later on in the prices as well.
Francois, are you back?
Yes.
There was just a little bit of a hiccup there. Anyway, continue there. We just lost the signal there for 30 seconds.
Oh, I'm not sure. Where did you leave?
You were talking about the workers and what they're going to do now that they've lost their jobs.
Oh yeah. So we've got these workers that I don't know how long are they able to live without an income. How long have they saved for? And how long are they going to sit idly by and watch the government, destroy their livelihoods? So that is in a sense how revolutions start, is by people going hungry. And then also just another aspect is the value chain itself. The value chain just doesn't start up on a whim. If the minister decides to open it one day or another, it's not going to be the next day everything is back to normal. Most people have gone out of business. Most businesses did not receive the income that they usually would. So, they are not there to complete their function within the value chain. So it's stuff like this that we also have to bear in mind.
No, definitely. And then also, I think something that we need to look at is the effect that this is going to have on in going farther into the future. This is not just something that's going to have a V-shape recovery pattern where there's a little bit of a dip and then you get back on your feet. The big problem is what we're going to see is that a lot of these businesses that are connected to farming outputs, that use farming products to as inputs, are closing for good, and you're getting a lot of these farms that are never going to open again. So
Yes.
Maybe looking more into the future, is Saai planning to give support to some of these farmers regarding the more long-term picture and in regards to helping them recover the best you can from these regulations and the impact that these regulations are going to have?
Yeah, look, we will as an industry. I don't think one organization can do that. I think as an industry we have to look at that. Currently we've got Land Bank that's in trouble, and that is a huge worry for us, because most other financing institutions are also heavily dependent on them, or were exposed by that debt. So I think as organizations, we will have to find new ways of financing farmers, new ways, setting up cooperatives. A cooperative is a brilliant way to gain buying power, and especially for smaller farmers. So it's plans like these that we have to get together. But one organization on its own is not going to do it. The fact that we borrowed this much money from international funds and banks, it would have been nice to see this go to farmers on the ground. We've had major issues with this agricultural disaster management fund. Coupons being issued, and then they allotted a co-op that you can buy with these coupons from just says no, they don't accept coupons. You can pay cash and you can claim it back from the department. It's really been a mess, and farmers have just given up in most cases with this funding. So government has tried the funding route, and most of the money just got lost. So I think it's important for a body outside of government to handle all these international funds and aid that has been given to us.
So maybe then when people are looking in terms of what the future holds, you've talked in detail about the things that you've already done and the action you've already taken. Are there any important dates on the horizon that people can mark on their calendars, specifically the people in these industries that want to have as much clarity as possible in terms of where their livelihoods are going?
Yeah, I think with regards to tobacco, the next 2 weeks are going to be crucial. And like I said, the tobacco judgment is going to have a ripple effect on all the other matters that will be heard. We also know that FITA is still waiting for their appeal decision to be heard, but I think BATSA is the best case here. They've had a multi-pronged approach, and I'm really optimistic about how the matter proceeded. So the next 2 weeks for tobacco. Then on the 30th, so we're delivering our replying affidavit with regards to wine on Thursday, and we'll probably then be sure about the date for the wine matter, but we set it down for the 18th of August, and that's going to be a big one as well. So the 18th of August is one to watch, and then for game farmers, we're looking at the 25th of August as well. And like I said, there's not a lot of time left for game farmers, but we're going to try our best. If we can save just a couple of farmers, from these absolutely horrific regulations, then we must do so.
And then also, in regards to these cases that you've taken on, in each of these 3 industries, are you feeling confident in terms of your case and your arguments? Do you think you've got a strong case in each of these 3 industries in terms of the fight to save them?
Yes, I do. I think, especially because the tobacco case started off very well. I think, it was a great legal team that was assembled by Batsa, and that's going to set the tone for the rest of, of the judgments. If Batsa doesn't go well, it's going to be an uphill battle, because most of these arguments ring true for the rest of the value chain, because they are also reliant on it. Irrationality is a big thing that is argued. Constitutional infringements are something that is hugely argued, and then procedural issues and vagueness, especially with regards to hunting. So I'm positive, but maybe I'm too close as well. We've seen some shocking turns of events during this lockdown period, and only time to tell.
We've actually got a good question here in the chat. Sideline Opinions asks, won't the government just appeal the tobacco judgment to the Constitutional Court and drag things out? So maybe to change that question a little bit, will you be dealing with, for example, these types of tactics, these kinds of delay tactics that could possibly be used against you?
Yes, this is a very real concern, and we discussed it especially during the tobacco hearing. I think it is important to exhaust all our legal options and to just make sure that we, as soon as, even if an appeal is launched, to make sure that the process is sped up and that we don't drag it out. It is important that we are procedurally sound with these issues and that we just keep on pressing. Look, we've tried talking to government. I think most organizations have tried talking to government, but for how long? And we just said, look, we have to draw a line in the sand. And even if it's opened up, we need a clear judgment that says under level 3, 4, 5, this is not permissible anymore to ban any of these products. Because like we saw with alcohol, one day it's open, the next day they decide it's closed again. So even if they open it up now, we are going to carry through with these matters, as we need these judgments to play in our favor in future. But yes, this appeal process is definitely something to worry about, and our legal team is aware of it, and we're trying to look at all our options available.
And maybe just a final thought on in terms of your fight. I've put the website to Saai in the description if you want to go check it out. But Francois, how can people support you in this case, and how can these cases coming up, and how can they support you overall in your future missions to help family farmers?
Look, we've got very loyal members that have supported us throughout these campaigns and have done so for the past year. We do not only have farmers as members, but we also have friends of family farmers. We all have an uncle or a brother or a father or an aunt on a farm, and that's important. Why? And it's important to keep them there because farmers or family farmers anchor rural towns, they anchor rural communities, and that's why the United Nations also said that is the number one way to stop urbanization and migration. And it's also the only way which we can achieve most of the sustainable development goals of providing jobs. So we've got a lot of supporters. So we've got non-farming members as well. We've got a donations page. But then just from a personal point as well, if you see something, an organization, a group, an event, a movement against the lockdown regulations currently, because I think it's time to open up. I think we've gone past the wave, and we need to start saving the economy now, because that's going to result in much more deaths later on.
You mentioned something interesting there in terms of the family farmers' role in the community. Now, could you just maybe elaborate a bit more? This is a bit more of a different topic, but it is something interesting that matches the themes that I discuss on this channel. Could you elaborate a bit more in terms of why specifically family farmers are such an integral type of person in a community? What's their role?
Look, the United Nations commissioned this study in 2014, where they said, we've got these issues that is plaguing the world. Unemployment, poverty, hunger, migration was a big one as well. And they said, what is the role of family farmers in curbing these issues? And what was interesting, it was found that family farmers anchor rural communities. And by saying that, a small town usually consists of a co-op, a primary school, and a church. And family farmers are the ones that, and their workers are the ones who support these small towns. So if a family farm is taken over by a big corporation or by a company, they do not use the local attorney, the local auditor. And if they do not go to these types of institutions or support these businesses, they usually go to the next bigger city. And once one of these legs, a primary school or a church, if one of those legs give in, that town gives in, and which means all of these people have to find their services somewhere else. And this has happened throughout South Africa. So it is important for us to keep family farmers on their farms, as they are a way to curb all of these issues. But also, farming is one of the best ways to create wealth. I've seen farmers go from nothing to everything, because it's something where if you put in the work, you get the results that you need. So that in a nutshell. But it was a very interesting study published, and that is why the United Nations launched the Decade for Family Farming, to say to each country in the world, listen, this is the best mechanism to stop all these issues or to curb most of these issues that we are having, and to support family farmers. They've created proactive policies, and as Saai, we created and we wrote a declaration on farming. I think it was called the crimes against family farmers, aggression against family farmers, to stop farm attacks, because that is something that is hurting family farming in South Africa a lot. Most newer generations of family farmers don't want to get involved in farming if their families are not safe and they are not able to stay on their farms.
That actually leads me into the final thing that I wanted to discuss with you, and that is farm murders, and not specifically something that's connected to lockdown regulations. But is Saai involved in any type of actions to help combat this scourge of farm murders and farm attacks that are plaguing the family farmers specifically in South Africa?
Yes, look, as an organizer, we are a network organization. So we partner with other organizations to not duplicate the capacity that we have, or that they already have. Why do something when somebody else is already busy with it and doing a great job of it? So with regards to labor matters, we partnered with NIASA, which is the biggest employer organization in South Africa. And when it comes to farm murders, we partnered with AfriForum because they've got the best capacity for it. And as an organization, we are also driving a huge international campaign. When we go to, like earlier this year, we went to Russia, we went to Hungary, we went to Italy to speak to to our counterparts over there and to inform them of the issue that we are having in South Africa with farm murders and the fact that government denies this.
Yes, no, I think it's an excellent way to contribute to the cause, is to work with other organizations doing a good job as well. But Saai is definitely doing an excellent job in regards to the things that you do best, definitely. So Francois, thank you very much for joining me tonight. I learned a lot of new things, a lot of interesting facts and arguments to the fore that I didn't consider personally. I see Sideline Opinions says, very well spoken, both of you, Francois and Adams. You have highlighted the important issues at hand. Saai and AfriForum are our life rafts in the COVID storm.
Thank you.
Very well put. So, Francois, maybe just one last thing. I've put a link to your website and to your Twitter, both Saai's Twitter and your own personal Twitter, in the description. Is there any other links or websites or places that people can go, for example, Facebook pages, to get more updates about what Saai is doing?
Yes, we are on Facebook. We've got a YouTube channel that's quite active as well, on Twitter, on Instagram. I maybe can say that we are looking to launch a documentary on the crisis in the wine community in the Western Cape on the 13th. This will be as a type of a build-up to the court case on the 18th. So you can look forward to that. Go and like our Facebook page. I think we will publish it there first and then on YouTube. And the aim is actually just to send it as far as wide and wide as possible. Because I think the statement to say that the government doesn't realize what they are doing to our economy, I think actually they do realize what they're doing to our economy. I think they just don't care in this matter. they've got some other agenda that they are driving, because the figures speak for themselves. We were a country that were driving a negative economy before COVID hit. Now it's gone through the roof, and you don't see them chasing after the taxes that stuff like tobacco and alcohol would produce. So there's something else at play here.
Right, so I've put a link to your, I see Kyle has put a link to your Facebook in the chat, and I've put a link to your YouTube. If you're watching live, you can click on that. But I haven't put a link to their YouTube in the description, but I will now. So if you're not watching live, you can go check out in the description, go subscribe to Saai to get some updates on what they're doing. And also go check them out on Twitter, go follow Francois and also Saai. So yeah, thank you very much, Francois, for joining me tonight, and also thank you everyone for tuning in and doing your part in regards to asking questions and giving your feedback in the chat. I appreciate it a lot. You can also like this stream if you want to help out the channel and get the word out. If you like what Francois talked about tonight and you want to get this message out there, you can also share the link to the stream on your social media and wherever you, or with friends and family if you want to. And you can also see I'm sporting a new Conscious Caracal merch that you can also, if you like what you see here, you can go check it out in the description. There's a link to that as well. So yeah, thank you very much for everyone that tuned in. I hope you enjoy the rest of your night. And Francois, good luck and Godspeed to all your endeavors and missions in the future. You're doing excellent work.
Thank you, Ernest, and thanks to all the viewers for tuning in.
All right, good night.